Welcome back to On the Clock, our show about making the moments matter. I'm your host, Elisa Gums. Today, we're chatting about how to live a vegan lifestyle at the luxury level with Dominique Side, founder of The Luxury Vegan, the only concierge service that helps people transition to a more conscious, more compassionate, more sustainable lifestyle. Dominique, we're so excited to have you on the Clock. How are you?
Thank you for having me, Lisa. I'm great.
You're known as Queen Vegan and considered a leading authority on the luxury vegan lifestyle. But for most people out there, I'm not sure they know what that means. So what even is a luxury vegan lifestyle?
So I'll break it down in this way. I'll start with the definition of veganism because a lot of people don't even get that far. And they confuse it, rightly so, based on marketing with the plant-based diet. So the definition of veganism is to the greatest extent possible and practicable, avoid the harm and exploitation of animals. So that is complete lifestyle choice, you know. A luxury vegan lifestyle is essentially taking, people that wear designer clothes and drive, high-end cars and things like that, and that space marrying the two. So finding the alternatives that exist in the high-end space that are also vegan friendly, which a lot of people think is impossible or doesn't even exist. However, I've become an expert in curating and finding those alternatives.
You are living proof that it does indeed exist.
Mm-hmm.
So you yourself became a vegan in 2017. How did you first become interested in a vegan lifestyle?
Initially, I wasn't even going for becoming vegan. That wasn't my goal. I really didn't have a goal. I made some small changes in my life. I had gone through this phase of wellness, like just working out, and someone approached me about plant-based protein powder. And they're like, oh, it's great for your digestive system. You should switch to this. I'm like, oh, that sounds wonderful. Why not? And then the same person introduced me to the makeup line that the same company makes. And I'm like, well, what's not vegan or natural about makeup? And I did the research and I was mortified. So, aside from animal testing, which everyone is aware of, you in general, there were ingredients like fish scales to make eyeshadow glittery or sparkly. So I was like, no, that's okay. I don't want that on my face. Then it was cleaning products around my house, less chemicals. Why not? It's great for family. Da, 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 da. But I never considered my food. Steak was my favorite, thing to eat. And I'm Creole. Seafood is like within my whole cultural diet. There's no alternatives for that. So I was never giving that up for what, Then I watched a documentary. And if you don't want to be held accountable or do any kind of mindset shift, just don't watch documentaries. But but I watched What the Health at the time. That was the one that was getting the most buzz. It had just come out. And when it was over, I said, I can't unsee any of those things and unknow any of those things. That same day, I said, okay, I think I'm done. And I had shrimp that night, couldn't finish it, tried again the next day, ate like 2 out of 6 pieces, and I was like, I guess I really am done. And so there was a part of me that was a little sad almost because I didn't know enough about veganism to know the abundance of options that would be available to me. I just knew I couldn't eat meat anymore. And that had been the center of my life up until that point. So it's like, what does my plate even look like without it? I don't know. And so it was, an adventure into the unknown.
There are a couple of things there that I'm so glad you mentioned, because I think a lot of people, especially in our communities,
Mhm.
need to talk about them. The first is that a lot of those foods have a big cultural significance for us. So,
Yes.
as you were navigating your own transition, how did you sort of like handle those things, like talking to your family about it or having like holiday dinners? Like,
Right. You know, the first of each holiday was challenging, to say the least, but not just for me, for my family as well, because I became vegan a week before Independence Day. And at that time, we were celebrating with my mom in Biloxi, where I'm from. And I hadn't included anyone else in my transition. It was very a personal conviction for sure, and still is. But my sister, who is 4 years younger than me, she was already vegan, and she hadn't been vegan that long, but she was already vegan. So she and I uh, purchased some stuff from Whole Foods and put it in the utility room where the other refrigerator was, and we were eating from a shelf, that you would usually fold clothes on. So, it was just this weird situation. And then I went back home and, I really didn't sweat it for Labor Day, but by the time Thanksgiving came around, I had been removed from preparing meat for months, and I had by that time realized that I had an emotional reaction to even the thought of it, which I didn't anticipate at all. So I told my kids, one of which had become vegan by then, that, this year I'm going to make these things. And they're like, I'm sorry, what did you say? um, because Thanksgiving at my house, although we visited other people's houses, like family, and essentially ate what they ate, I didn't cook traditional, like a turkey or anything like that, because we had those at other people's houses. So I made like a standing rib roast, and I made a seafood dressing with crab and shrimp and crawfish in it. And my kids were like, I'm sorry, you're not doing what? You're vegan. I'm not vegan. Cook the meats. And I'm like, sorry, I can't even bring myself to open a package. I can't go to the butcher and get a ground rib roast. Like, it's not even a thing. And so there were challenges there, just between me and my kids, and them coming to terms with, especially the older two who still aren't vegan, um, them coming to terms with, I'm not doing this thing that you've come to expect, that is tradition. We're creating new traditions at this point, and you just gotta come along with me. um, so each of the first of all the holidays, crawfish season, that was another, like, what are we doing? um, I think the first year did host people and bought it already prepared, and here, guys, here's your stuff, and then I made separate, like, boiled veggies for myself. But after that, I couldn't even host them. It just, and eating them, and it was a huge transition in that regard.
yeah. How long did it take for like your kids and your family to like get over it
Um,
and forgive you?
my younger two kids were fine right off the bat, essentially. One, like I said, became vegan like the next week. He was like, oh, okay, this is cool, let's do this. But he grew up with food allergies and was like a label reader, and so it was easy for him to take that on because that was part of his routine regardless. um, the youngest one transitioned over time, was pescatarian for a while, then was vegetarian for a while. And for those who don't know, pescatarian includes seafood, and vegetarian includes animal byproducts, just not the animals. So we're talking milk, butter, cheese, things like that. Then they went away to camp and came back vegan. I don't know what happened at camp, but That was the straw that broke the camel's back. Ugh. Terrible analogy, but yes,
For a
exactly.
vegan, right?
But the older two, it took them a little while, it was getting past the holidays was probably the biggest adjustment. But once we got past the first of each of the holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, New Year's Day, once we kind of moved past that, then they're like, okay, this is our new normal. I guess this is what we have to come to expect. This is permanent. So,
Yeah. The other thing that you said that I thought was so interesting is that you
yeah.
felt sad at first when you decided to do this, which I can understand because
Mm-hmm.
it feels like you're giving up a lot, that you're losing a lot. And so there's sort of like a grief there. How did you handle that?
There's a whole mix of emotions. There was a part of me that felt like I wish I had done this a long time ago. How did I not know that I was contributing to all of this, and that I was affecting my body in this way by consuming these things? And then so it was like, this is an amazing change to make. But then the other side of that was, I don't even know what I'm getting into. I just know I need to do it, and I don't know what I can eat, and I don't know where I can go. I don't know what options exist for me. What is this even going to look like? I'm doing it and I'm committed because my why, it's there's a purpose in it, for me. However, I love food so much. Like there are people who eat to live and live to eat. One extreme or the other. There are people
Mm-hmm.
who really don't
Yes.
enjoy eating, and they eat because they have to, or that kind of stuff. I'm not that person. I am not
I
that
don't
person.
understand those
I
people.
am a foodie. I always have been. I eat whatever I want. Okay. And I enjoy all of it. So I realized over time that it's a misconception. I don't operate from a space of depravity. I'm not deprived in any way. I wouldn't even call them sacrifices, because what I gave up wasn't beneficial to my body, to the planet, to other beings. It's not a sacrifice, Um, I operate from a space of abundance. I am truly fulfilled. I have discovered so much more by putting those things aside and not using them as the center of my existence. I wish I'd done it sooner.
You just talked about the uncertainty
Yeah.
when you first make the transition of not knowing. And I think so many people are curious about the lifestyle,
Yes.
but also intimidated by it. As someone who helps people make that change for a living, what are some of the biggest challenges that you see, or some of the most common mistakes that people
Dairy.
make?
when people when people
Dairy is
ask
a
me
big
for
challenge.
advice, whether they're my clients or not, the thing that I say to eliminate first is dairy, because no one actually realizes how much dairy is in everything, like everything. It's almost ridiculous, to the point to where you have to laugh at it sometimes, where you find the derivatives of dairy. So everyone assumes milk right off the bat. They're like, I don't drink cow milk. I drink almond milk, and because I'm lactose intolerant. And I'm like, honey, we all are, because we're not baby cows, So there's that. It's just been over, centuries that some people's genetics have transformed to where they tolerate and maybe can process dairy. And those people, originate from certain regions of the world. And, but people of color, especially Black people, no, that didn't happen. So there's that. Um, I feel like uh, if you read the backs of labels, and I tell people to start with the allergen warning, because It's the easiest place to start. It's in bold. It's required on most packaging. It'll tell you there is wheat, there is soy, there is milk, there is something, you know. So I start there. That makes it easier for me. If I don't see it there, I glance over the ingredients to see if I find something else that's not vegan. But dairy is usually easy because they have to list it as an allergen. Um, but whey protein, casein, like there's derivatives of milk, lactose, that people are most familiar with lactose, but they're not looking at whey. They're not really putting two and two together. They're not looking for casein. They don't even know where that comes from. But it's in everything. It's in chips. Okay? Like there's probably only 2 brands of jalapeno chips that I eat because all the rest of them have milk in them, and it's to cut the pepper. But it's not necessary. It's just a production thing that a lot of companies have been doing for forever, and they continue to do. So,
When most people think of veganism, they jump
yes.
immediately to food, as you mentioned earlier, that they
Yeah.
equate it with a plant-based diet. But your company does
Yeah.
so much more than that. It's really about making
Mhm.
ethical choices as a consumer and reducing your impact or minimizing your
Yes.
impact on the planet. But can you explain what that
Sure.
looks like in real life for
Um,
people?
so at this level, you know, luxury level, there are several things, that I do when I go in and consult with a client. So yes, of course, we talk food, you know, fridge clean out, pantry clean out, but I also do like a closet audit. Most people don't really move beyond their plate, which is a plant-based diet, as I attributed to earlier. They don't move on beyond their plate, and they're not really thinking about their clothes. There's a couple things about clothes that you take into account. If you're looking for it simply being vegan friendly and that's it, then you're looking at materials: leather, silk, wool, cashmere, things like that. So I'm not a consumer of any of those materials. Now we're in a space where vegan leather is becoming more popular. However, if you're being eco-conscious, then you're also looking at where does the vegan leather, what is it made of? Where does it come from? Is it some kind of poly something, which originates from like crude oil, which is, a natural resource that we should not be using in that way, especially for mass production purposes. There's so many new innovations now, like mushroom based leather, pineapple based leather, apple based leather, and there are high end designers that are using it. Like Cartier makes apple based leather watch bands. But if you're not looking for that, then that's
Who
not something
knew?
that would be on your radar, right? But they do. They make those now, and we've got a couple different designers. Gucci Gucci makes Demetra, and it's a leather alternative that is made from wood pulp. Now, people go in the Gucci store and they just like the shoes, so they're just buying the shoes. They don't really care, and they assume that it's leather because it's Gucci, and what high end thing is not made from real leather? But there are at least 3 styles that they produce that are made from this new innovation that they've brought to market. And I think it's amazing. And of course, I have all 3. Of course I
Of
do.
course you
Then we've
do.
got handbags, belts, shoes, and those are tough spaces, to find alternatives for. But in women's clothing, we've come a little further than we are in men's so far. And I think that's because of the demand. Not to say that all women are more conscious than men, but as far as consumerism, the female dollar, there's more diversity there as far as wants and needs. And So people are looking, and we have designers like Stella McCartney, who is vegetarian, and she uh, specifically focuses on beyond the materials supply chain and consciously sourcing what the supply chain looks like. She uses wool, but where does it come from? She makes partnerships with different organizations, and she knows exactly where everything comes from. You can even get into fair trade. And does your supply chain include treating people, well, and paying them a fair wage? So this can go as far as you want it to. um, but those are the things. I mean, beyond food and then clothing and accessories, interiors, like home design. I consult on that for people in commercial spaces and in residential spaces. So, you know, um, I've worked with a few designers in redoing people's homes or commercial spaces and consulted on what materials or what suppliers, manufacturers that are earth friendly, using sustainable products or renewable resources and things like that. How people travel. So what hotels they're frequenting, what airlines they're using. If they're airlines that are forward in this space, they're using biofuels and things like that. So there's so much to this space.
I want to get some concrete tips out there for our audience since you're such an expert in this. And I'm going to
Yeah.
go back to fashion and start there because you're also the co founder of a sustainable fashion brand called Vegan Bay. And so you can speak to it not just from the point of a consumer, but from a business owner. As you were saying, Stella McCartney pays close
Yes.
attention to her supply chain. For the average person who wants to have a
Mm-hmm.
more conscious closet, what are
So for the
what's
average
your advice?
person, I would say the most like eco-conscious way to approach fashion is resale. Upcycling is huge now. So you even see that in the luxury market, the upcycling of what would otherwise be waste materials. There are a lot of companies that are doing buybacks, or you turn in something, they take that and they turn it into something else. And resale, it helps to prevent all of the fabric waste going to different landfills where it doesn't break down for 200 years. And people don't really know when they're donating that, while their intentions are wonderful, they don't know the end life of the piece. They don't know what's actually going to happen to it. And most fashion ends up in a landfill, unfortunately. So it's looking at the materials of what you're buying, like cotton, hemp, materials that are eco-friendly, so they'll break down. They're biodegradable in a sense. So there's that. And then there's upcycling or resale, thrifting, that space. So those are the two major things that the average person could do to be more eco-conscious with fashion.
And then when it comes to travel, what tips can you give us for making our
So
trips
look
more
for
eco-friendly?
hotels that embrace their environment, the natural environment. You know, there are resorts that build these monstrous, campuses, and it's like you're not even in the country that you're visiting. But you can go to eco hotels. Essentially, looking for that label alone will pull up a lot of options where you're more integrated. Your experience is more integrated into the natural environment. Hotels that hire local staff that are educating their staff on sustainability, that are doing away with single-use plastics, and stuff like that. There's a lot there now because globally there's an awareness that didn't exist years ago around eco-conscious travel. So there's probably 11, maybe 13 global organizations that provide certifications in that space. So if they're brand new builds, they're wanting LEED certifications, those LEED. If it's a refabrication of something, like there's so many different ways to identify how eco-friendly a place is, but mostly stick with what looks natural to the environment that it's in.
So with the luxury vegan, you not only help people change their lives, but then you take it a step further to help them inspire and influence the people around them to make similar changes. Why was that part so important for
When
you?
we were in the quarantine phase of this pandemic, I was looking for a way to affect change on a wide scale. And initially I said, oh, I can do an online course or something like that. And so many people can sign up. And, but I was thinking about how do I support them? Because you really do need a significant support system, especially in the beginning of your transition, someone who's knowledgeable, and just, not where 99% of the people are questioning your decision and they're feeling judged by your change and then they're projecting onto you. That's difficult. I realized that I wouldn't be able to support people to the extent that I would want to at that level. And also, I wanted to be relatable to the person that I'm talking to so I can speak from experience. So I said, okay, let me talk to people in the luxury space, C-suite executives, the world thought leaders, that kind of thing. Because essentially, if I can affect change and help them with a compassion mindset shift, then there's no way that that wouldn't trickle down and affect, the way that they parent, the way that they operate in relationship, the way that they run their companies, the way they deal with their staff, where they allocate their resources. So what causes they get behind. And if they're putting their money in the spaces that they become passionate about, then it can affect the world on a much wider scale because, money makes the world go round, like they say. So the innovation that we need in this space requires resources and investments from people that have that available. So if you're affecting change at that level, then you're actually helping way more people than the one person that you're touching, physically. So that was my thought behind this approach.
Dominique, this has been so fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing the unique ways you're helping people make the most of the time we've been given. And thank you all for watching On the Clock. We've got to wrap up now, but we'll see you next time as we continue to talk about working with purpose and living with passion.